let's see. I worked at Chick-fil-A for a while. And Chick-fil-A is a great company, but I walked in because I thought, this is my first job. Like I'm grown, I can handle myself. I walked in with a full suit into the interview with Chick-fil-A, and the guy interviewing me had like a golf shirt on.
Oh,
and
no.
so I was way overdressed.
That is fantastic.
Welcome to Young and Adulting, a podcast of the young adults community at Christ Fellowship Church. Our hope is to create a safe place for authentic conversation around the ins and outs of life as we all try to navigate following Jesus in the world we live in today. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the conversation.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back with another episode, and I'm so excited about this conversation today. We're talking about how to do all kinds of things, but today we're talking about how to get a job, because those are things that we need, because money is something that we use and careers are something that we live in. And so we are going to really get to it today and talk about some practical ways that we can get jobs. We've got a ton of topics that we're going to cover. But thankfully, I am not the one that's going to cover them. We have Lauren Brown and Alex Munoz joining us today. Ladies, thank you so much for being a part of this. I think it's an important conversation. And Alex, I'd love for you to share kind of where you came from and what you do, and why your voice is something that we're going to be blessed by in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'm just so excited to be here, very humbled to have this opportunity to connect and talk with you all. But my name is Alex Munoz. I currently am a recruiter for Macy. So I work on their college relations team. I get to travel around the U.S., go to different universities, and give people jobs, so hire people, which is really great. I graduated from University of Florida in 2019, so not all that long ago, but go Gators.
Well, okay, hold on. I'm an LSU fan.
Oh, no.
And this Saturday, we tore you down. So had to throw that in. Go Tigers, keep going.
But that's okay. It's okay. We'll make it work. It's okay. But graduated from UF in 2019 with a bachelor's in management in Spanish and my master's degree in international business over there, and signed immediately with Macy's for their executive development program. So did some management with them, and then transitioned over to now become a recruiter for the same program that I was a part of. And what I would say is, I am a young adult that is currently figuring out everything with faith and business and how the two come together. And while I definitely don't consider myself to be an expert in the role or in this topic, I would say that the Lord has blessed me a lot with surrounding me with a lot of people to give a lot of insight into his kingdom culture and how he desires for us as young adults, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, really to navigate this topic and be excellent in everything that we do.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you're here and a part of it. Lauren, please tell me you did not go to UF.
I did not.
Thank the Lord.
You wish you were a fish. I went to Palm Beach Atlantic. Hey.
I'm about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And Alex, it's so funny where you're saying I may not be the expert, but just talking to you and going through this preparation, she is the expert. You know so many things as a young adult that you really are an expert in this area. So I'm excited I'm learning from you as you're sharing. So I'm excited that you're here. I'm Lauren Brown. I have the privilege of looking after the HR team at Christ Fellowship, and I came on the team in 2011. So it's been 11 years now, and it's been such a ride. When I came onto the HR team, I actually didn't even know fully what HR was. I got my degree in accounting because I was good at it. I was the girl in college who changed my my major 4 times. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I stuck with accounting because I was good at it. But accounting is boring as rocks, and I'm sorry for all the accountants out there. My husband is one, but that would be. I'm like that. This is an introduction, but I think the first thing I would say is just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's what you should do.
Ooh,
yeah,
fascinating.
You need to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that's an interesting idea that you have to. Not everything you're good at is something you should work for and get a job in. So
right.
How do you find the right job?
That is a great question, and would start that just by asking, what problems do you enjoy solving?
Okay.
So there's a variety of different ways that can line up in a career, but rather than thinking about what you're good at, because that's the pit that I fell into and what I got my degree in, which is actually still a helpful degree, but not what I wanted to do with my life. But if I were thinking about what problems do I enjoy solving, that's going to add value somewhere where I'm going to feel fulfilled in it.
Right. That's wild. Alex, what made this job the right job for you? How did you make that decision?
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of a paradox of a question and answer for me, in my opinion, because I'm sure there's many listeners who are, tuning in right now that just hearing that we're talking about jobs and how to get a job, they're automatically tensing. They're getting super stressed, super anxious, and feeling like, how do I know that I'm not making a mistake? Yeah. And so I think before we even go into that question of how I came to the right job, I think it's important to note that I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect job, because every job is going to have its challenges. I think especially as a young adult entering into the workforce, we kind of have this lie that we feed into that my first job has to be my career choice. It has to be, the absolute, my purpose in life. It has to be perfect. I have to love what I do and be passionate about it every single day when I wake up. And that is absolutely true. But sometimes you don't find that in your first job. And that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that because it's a career journey. It's exactly that, a journey. And sometimes you don't hit it on your first one. And I think the second piece is, as young adults that are also, following Jesus and trying to really represent Christ in the workforce, I think we sometimes stumble into this fear that if we choose one job over another, that maybe we're making a mistake or God is not pleased with our choice or he's not going to bless us in one direction versus another. And to that, I'd probably say, God is gracious and he's so kind. And as long as your heart is in the right place of making a choice every day with whatever career you go into to show up to be excellent every day, to serve others, to lead humbly, but also with confidence, to, come with that heart posture. It doesn't matter which way you choose. The Lord is going to bless you. He's never going to leave you in it. And he's going to help you through that to navigate and also kind of take that self audit of why am I here? Like, what do I enjoy? But also what's my sweet spot of what am I good at? So I think for me, I did not start off my career feeling like, what, this is it. This is amazing. This is what I want to do. It was great. And I learned so much. And it was such a phenomenal experience for me to really hone in on my leadership skills. But I also started to realize, I don't think this is what I want to do for the end all be all of my career. But that ties into a whole other topic of, what do you do once you recognize that? How do you step into that of, expressing your interests, expressing to your managers or supervisors, I love what I'm doing. I want to keep learning in this, but I also think I can start growing into something else.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. We are here with a director of HR and a recruiter in HR. Tell me your personal, so I don't want to hear somebody else's story, your worst interview story. What do you think it is?
Oh, wow.
What do you think it is? I'll start with mine.
Okay,
so that you can
I would
think
love
of
that.
yours.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Let's see. I worked at Chick-fil-A for a while, and Chick-fil-A is a great company, but I walked in because I thought, this is my first job. Like I'm grown. I can handle myself. I walked in with a full suit into the interview with Chick-fil-A, and the guy interviewing me had like a golf shirt on.
Oh,
and
no.
so I was way overdressed.
That is
and
fantastic.
Felt awful about it. I looked great, felt awful.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out. So that was my, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is awful. I'm sweating. It's incredible. What's yours?
Oh, well, I'm just thinking, it is good to research the culture of who you're interviewing with before you go in, but we'll get to that later. That is a sight, and I'm going to keep picturing that. That's so funny. So at first, when you asked the question, I wasn't sure if you were thinking like, who have I interviewed that they bombed? And I'm like, no, poor people. Like,
throw them under the bus.
Like, I don't know that I want to share one of those stories. So funny. Okay. When I interviewed at Christ Fellowship back back in 2011, I don't think I bombed the interview. I actually felt really confident about it. And so I'm going to share my young and dumb mistake with you guys is I felt really good. And I was a nanny at the time. And so I decided, well, I obviously need to be ready for my first day because my interview went so great. So let me go ahead and quit my nanny job to be ready for when I get started for the offer that I hadn't received.
Oh my goodness.
And God was kind. Thank God.
Sometimes.
I mean, I was young and dumb and the offer came and thank goodness I have learned and I have grown and I try to apply wisdom now to my faith, not just faith, but wisdom is great.
Faith. Yes.
Yeah, that was very blind faith. So that would be my worst story.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I'm so grateful to still be here.
Can you top our stories?
Yeah, I don't know about top it, but I can definitely throw my 2 cents in there.
Yeah.
My worst interview was definitely my own. And it was right when I was trying to figure out what career I wanted to go into. Right out of college, I found this company. I was determined to work for this company. And it was in a financial analyst role. So I know that you studied accounting. So while you were talking about how, you were just good at it, I'm like, I wish I was good at that, but I am not. But, the title sounded great. The role sounded great. I was determined to get this job. Only problem, I'm horrible at finance. And it is not a skill of mine whatsoever. But I was like, you know what? My zeal, my passion can get me in the door.
Yes, I love it.
I applied and I ended up, I was so determined that I actually reached out to a former mentor who was working in the role in the company. She gave me a referral. She talked to the interviewers, to the recruiter specifically about me, like, yes, this girl's awesome. I know her. Horrible, awful mistake. And I knew that I wasn't good at finance, but I still went through the interview. It was just like this. So it's not even like it was a virtual interview where I could just tap out and pretend that my Wi-Fi disconnected. So I wish I could say, yeah, well, I've seen everything. But no, so it was so bad. I went into the interview. The first question they asked me was a basic finance question. And I looked at them just like this. It was a table just like this. And I just kind of looked and I went, yeah. And that was my answer. That was it. It was so embarrassing. I was mortified. And again, it wasn't virtual. So I had to take my happy little self out of there with my little portfolio and walk right up out the door. I wish I could exaggerate that it wasn't that bad, but truly the 2 interviewers looked at each other during the interview and were like, oh my gosh, who is this girl? Like, this is really awkward. It was so bad. So yeah, I left, I cried, then I laughed because I thought it was funny. Because, it's not everything works. You're young, you're figuring things out. I definitely felt that, my passion or my commitment to the company could get me where skills needed to get me in the company. And that's okay too. Again, all about a self-audit of recognizing where your strengths are and where they're not. But I learned from it. And then 1 week later, I was actually flown out to then interview for the company that I'm at now. So,
wow.
You got to pull up your bootstraps and keep on going.
But I actually applaud you for the courage to step into, like, you took a step and it was brave and it was bold and you learned from it. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It was a lot, but it was okay.
That's awesome. We all have these stories, and the fun part was none of that was prepped. We all have just natural stories of complete flops at an interview.
Yeah.
So give us some tips. How could we avoid that? How can we prep and get ready for an interview well so that we don't wear a 3-piece suit, we don't show up without a job, do all this stuff. So help us out. How do we get ready for an interview?
Thankfully, there's so much you can learn on the front end now. Companies have websites, they share their history, most of them talk about their values. And so I would emphasize, do your research. Don't show up unprepared. Know who you're interviewing with and what's important to them so that when you're actually in the interview, you can speak their language because that will set you up to stand out. So definitely know who you're interviewing with. And Chick-fil-A, Lewis, I feel like you've been to Chick-fil-A before and they don't wear suits.
It was a job. It was an interview.
You were dressing for the role you wanted, not the one you had.
Yes.
Dan Cathy,
Confidence.
I'm coming for you. Yeah, didn't work out.
But if you know the culture and you know what they wear, then you can know how to arrive and how to present yourself. So definitely researching the organization in advance. You can also practice interviewing. I know that is not probably a desirable thing to do. It's just this awkward effort, but don't show up to your first interview, and that is literally the first time you're answering questions for someone. You've got to practice it with a friend, with a mentor, parent, someone who can give you practical feedback on how you're answering, what you could do differently, even things like your eye contact and your body language. It's not just the words that you're saying. So when you have practice, you're going to go into an interview actually more comfortable than you would if you hadn't practiced.
Yeah. Is it appropriate to, I know you had a friend at that one company. Is it okay to talk to their friend and say, hey, what should I wear? Or what kind of questions would they ask?
Absolutely.
If you don't have somebody on the inside, can you talk to an HR person of how should I go to this interview? Like, what should I wear? What are you looking for? Is that appropriate to ask?
That is appropriate. I wouldn't practice your interview with an HR person.
Yeah.
But you could ask them for some practical tips for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
And I would say, too, most interviews for most companies, they are looking for behavioral-based questions. Tell me about a time when you had to solve a problem. Tell me about a time when you led a team. What was the result? What was the impact that you had? So really looking at that method, it sounds really simple, but that is in most companies that I have interviewed with, and then now the position that I'm in, we're looking for behavior-based questions. We want to understand, tell me about a time when, and you can Google it. There's a whole list of questions that you can practice. So I think it's absolutely appropriate to reach out to someone that you either know in the position. Also, LinkedIn, great resource if you don't know anybody in the role. I know some companies don't list HR contacts. So going on LinkedIn, seeing if you have any connections with anyone who's in that position, people love to talk about themselves. So it's okay to reach out to someone and say, hey, would you be so gracious to lend me 15 minutes of your time? I'm interested in this role and would love to connect with you and just ask you about your experience in the position or with the company.
Right. Okay. So we've prepped. We've done our research. We're wearing the right attire. We show up to the interview. What are some tips of handling that conversation, that moment well?
I would say as you're in that moment and you're being asked behavioral-based questions, I appreciate when somebody shares not just the tasks and the things that they did, but the results that they got. So the impact that something that they did had. And if this is your first job and you're thinking back to other things, it's okay to give life examples and not work examples. So have some thoughts prepared on those behavioral-based questions, but rather than just sharing, these are the 3 things that I did, talk about the impact that they had and how that added value to something that you were a part of. And we talked about being authentic and speaking the language. Speaking someone else's language, the language of the organization that you're interviewing with, doesn't mean that you're being inauthentic. You need to, it's not a show, right? You're not performing. You need to share who you really are. But when that aligns with who they are and you can use some of their values and their culture in the conversation, that's always really helpful. And then the last thought that I had on this is you really do want to articulate how you can add value. So understanding the language of understanding business, right? Somebody is you're asking them to make a financial investment in you, to join their team. And usually that financial investment is pretty large, right? A salary or, an hourly rate. And so what is their return on that investment? What is the value that you're bringing that makes their investment worthwhile? So being able to share what value you would add to give them a great return on their investment.
Wow, that's fantastic. and you got to be authentic. You have to tell the truth. One time, my uncle hired a handyman. I think the guy's name was Bill or something, but on his resume, ice sculpturing was something that he could do.
Cool.
And so, like, our family was throwing some kind of party, or the company my uncle was working with was throwing a party, contracts this guy Bill to do an ice sculpture, and he brings a chainsaw and a chisel and basically makes a big circle. It was a mess, but on his resume, said he could do one thing, sold himself on it, and then whenever he was put to the wire, he had no skill whatsoever. So we want to make sure that what we're saying is authentic.
Yeah.
Trying to sell ourselves and the value we can add without overselling, right? Is that fair?
You got to back it up. So
Yeah.
I think if Bill had been thinking about it, some people would ask for examples of the work, you know? So you have to be able to speak to, if you give a resume to someone and they're going to go through bullet points with you and ask you, tell me, how did you do that? Give me the steps. What did it take to do that? You got to be able to answer the question for what you did and not, I think sometimes something that I see on resumes would be listing the efforts of what a team accomplished together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Versus what an individual accomplished, where they played a part that was maybe very small, but as a team they accomplished this. But when someone asks you, how did you do this? They can't answer it. So make sure that you're specifying your role that you played so that you're not overselling yourself. You're presenting your best self.
Right.
But you're not being inauthentic.
Right. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think about like resumes or like list your skills, and people put communication, leadership skills, all these different adjectives that try to describe themselves, but we need to come with examples so that when we're asked about it, we have something to say. That's fantastic. We go to the interview. Maybe the interview doesn't go too well. How do we handle like the conversation after the interview, especially if it didn't end up in our favor?
Yeah, I think I go back to my example of, my dream company didn't work out. That's okay. I think it was really easy in that moment to come to a space of, you know what? I'm just going to not be employed, and that's okay. But I couldn't sit in that, So I think it's still approaching the follow-up steps with humility. Just because you don't feel like you did well in the interview, it is always appropriate to follow up with a thank you to your recruiter and to your interviewers. I think it shows the humility of thank you for your time. Thank you for still considering me, even if it wasn't the right role for me, or I was not able to exemplify how I was best fit for the role. I still thank you for your time. So I think that's one thing that's really tangible. The other thing that I would say is, you have to do a self-evaluation. For me, it was coming to terms and understanding, why did I want that position? Maybe it was the title, maybe it was the pay, maybe it was, whatever that XYZ might be for you, but really determining what is it that you wanted, and then how does your skill set of your leadership skills, your experience, your education, how do those tie in? So understanding, are you applying for the right kind of role? I know there might be young adults who, maybe it wasn't just one position that they applied to. Maybe they're applying to the same position again and again, hoping that with time or with experience, they might be able to step into that role. And if you feel defeated, if you feel like maybe this isn't it, there will always be a position where you can actually transfer those skills, and you have to find the right role for the right person. So I think it ties in with doing your research. Culture for a company is really, really important, because even during the interview process, you are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you.
Wow.
Because if you think about it, when we as recruiters or as directors, we are taking interviewers who are some of our top talent to put them in a position to interview candidates. Why do we do that? Because we want to make sure that a candidate is also receiving that best impression of these are the kinds of people you're going to be working with. Do you see yourself with this kind of environment of collaborative, innovative, being able to communicate and collaborate with one another? And if you don't see yourself in that position, then that's important to also note. The company isn't always the one that is perfect. You have to evaluate what you want at the end of it as well. So research into culture. Is this a place where I can grow? Is this a place that is going to be invested in my development? Even if I'm not in a job that I love right now, is there somewhere else, another avenue within the same company that I can grow into? So research. I think it's really important. A lot of companies are very transparent and very vulnerable when it comes to their values, beliefs, and then reaching out to someone who you know that's either in the company, reach out on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor. There's a lot of different ways to connect. Another thing for any college students who are out there, career fairs. Go to them. They make all of the difference. It is part of my job to go to career fairs and to connect with different students. And a lot of the time, it helps expedite the process of interviews because you're making that time, you're putting in that effort and showing a company, I want this. I want to know more about the job. I want to know how I can succeed. So I think putting yourself out there in that regard too is it's hard, especially when you face disappointment, but you have to just put your chin up. You will find the right job. God is with you in it. He's not going to just leave you high and dry. But you also have to put in those first steps too to pick yourself up and keep on going.
Yeah, I love that. I heard somebody say you only have to be right once.
Yeah.
Like make a bunch of applications, go to a bunch of interviews. You're going to learn a lot about yourself in the process.
Right.
And you're right once, and then you've ended up with a job. I want to ask this question. It's not something that we've talked about before, but it's something I hear all the time. I hear people say, I don't feel fulfilled in my job. What is your response to that as HR representatives, as people who've been in their careers? Do jobs necessarily fulfill us? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I love that this is a Christian podcast because we got to bring our faith into this too.
Right.
And ultimately, we're putting our hope in Jesus, not in a job. And so there may be times where what we're looking for is a job that's utilizing our skills, our abilities, everything that we know that God put in us. And we want that to be something that's really fulfilling to us. But ultimately, we're called to be surrendered to God. And we may not be moved into the position that we want at the time that we want. And so I would say that's a matter of prayer, of taking that to God and just asking, like, is it time? Is it a season where I should be moving into something else and trusting that He's going to guide your steps, right? We're called to trust in God with all our heart and not lean on our own understanding. Lean on our own understanding. And so when we're trusting God, we know that if He's got us somewhere for a season and it is longer than we desired, that He's going to be faithful in that season. And so can I share a quick story like along these lines? Okay. When I was in college, I had a summer job at a camp, and this was my second summer going into it. The first summer I was a camp counselor, and so I went back the second summer to do the same thing. Excited to lead kids, be a camp counselor, and I show up and I was assigned to the kitchen.
Oof.
Y'all, that is like serving breakfast, lunch, dinner, scrubbing plates, cleaning peanut butter sandwiches off the tables. And this is what I'm giving my summer to. Wow. This is crazy. And I had just within my first couple of days, I knew I had a decision of, am I going to complain? Am I going to count down the days? Is this summer going to be a waste? Or am I actually going to give myself fully to this? Am I going to carry a great attitude? Am I going to carry the spirit that I think God wants me to carry into it, and let that bring joy and be a witness to other people? And it turned out to be the summer of my life. Like it was incredible.
It's amazing.
I fell in love with Jesus that summer.
Wow.
And when I tell you that every person around me had the crappiest, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, the crappiest attitude. But I didn't have to take on that attitude. I could have my own. I used it as prayer time, scrubbing dishes, just using it as a prayer time. And ultimately what happened is there were high school students coming in and out of the kitchen that summer. And there was a kid who said, I don't understand why you're happy. Like, what is that? Like, why you're scrubbing dishes this summer? And I was able to share the joy that I had in God. And that kid gave his life to Christ that summer. And so just knowing we're on a mission no matter what.
Yeah.
God gives us jobs. We're going to put our hands to the work that he gives us. We're not afraid of hard work. But if we're not in the position that we want to be in, we are not without mission. And so you give yourself to the mission that God has put you on and trust that the career, the job, the assignments are going to align with what he wants for you.
Oh my goodness. I love that. We got to give ourselves to the mission, and then God will put us in the right position. That's incredible.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot today. And the best part is we're not done yet. So part of the show notes for this podcast is going to be loaded with resources and a whole bunch of tools and tips. I think we have a template resume that you can, Alex, help put together. So, their free resources are coming to you. But I'd love if we had a last word, a last encouragement, a last charge in the space that you're in. What's your encouragement to young adults who are trying to get a job?
Yeah, I would say first, I'm blown away by your answer, Lauren, of just committing to the mission. I think that is something, even praying and getting ready for this podcast, I do feel and I believe that there are people out there who are really discouraged in the job that they find themselves in right now. And it's really difficult to know that, but that is something that I have been just hearing again and again and again. So thank you for affirming that and for speaking the truth in that. For anyone that's feeling discouraged, stick to the mission to be salt and light wherever it is that you find yourself in your career. Work with excellence with everything that you have, because if you can be trusted with the small things, then, people notice. The Lord above all else will notice, and he is the one that is in control of everything else. So yes, we put our hands to it, but God is the one who ultimately has the final say, and he's with you in it. So if you can be trusted with the small things, then you can be trusted with the bigger things as well. So keep pushing forward, stay focused on Jesus. I think that would be the biggest encouragement, which I know is sometimes hard when you're in that position. I can say from personal experience, there were a lot of times in my career, especially within the first 1 to 2 years, where I felt, this sounds so bad to say it, and I'm sorry, but I felt like I was above a certain role that I was doing. I felt I was above folding shirts and, folding pants and working customer service. I had my master's degree, and I was like, you know what? I didn't get my education for this. This is too much. And I felt that way, and I'm being really transparent. But the Lord spoke to me. There were so many times, if you ever saw me in a store folding shirts and crying, is because the Lord was speaking to me and saying, you know what? You have no idea how if you work at folding this with excellence, this is going to impact somebody. You don't know who it is, but are you still going to do it for me, even if you don't see the end result?
Wow.
And that is what kept me going. And little did I know, a couple of months later, I was going to be transitioning, still with the same company, but into a completely different role that was far beyond what I ever could have imagined. So keep going, stick to the mission, stay focused. If you need encouragement, community, we're here. I'll talk to you if you want to talk. But yeah, we've all been there. So it's not easy, but you can do it.
I love that. And my final encouragement would be do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work.
Do the work and release the results.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you do the work, you can feel good about it no matter what, no matter what happens, because you brought your best to it and you prepared and you did the work, and you're trusting that God is going to bring it to you and direct your steps either way. And so just knowing every time you step into something, every time you step into an interview, it's actually an opportunity for you to learn something and grow. And so using it as that and not letting the no become a discouragement, but letting it become a part of your development.
Right.
So you do the work and you release the rest.
That's so good. This is a podcast that I'm going to be going back and listening to many times. There's so much gold in this, and a lot of it is going to be at our one-pager that is in the show notes. We've got the template. We've got the resources. we've got the next steps for us. And I'm excited of what this could do. If we had a generation of people that were not afraid to put their hands and to do the work and not be afraid of the no, man, I think a lot of great things could happen in our communities and then in our lives as well. Young adults, we love you so much. We will see you next time on the next episode of Young and Adulting. Lauren, Alex, thank you so much for being a part of this and contributing. And what you do and where you are salt and light. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Lewis.
you.
Love you guys.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Young and Adulting. Follow us on Instagram at cf.youngadults. And if there's a topic you'd like to talk about, we want to hear about it. Send us an email or leave a comment with your thoughts. We'll see you next time.